So this is the very first cooking video that I've ever done, and I figured that since we're all in this quarantine state with the coronavirus, at least here where I live in northeastern North Carolina, we're all doing the stay home, stay safe thing, and I've got two little poodles at my feet. But anyway, we're doing that, and I figured it might be kind of fun if I did a cooking video, because I've had a lot of people ask me to do some for recipes that not everybody knows how to do, and this particular one happens to be one of the most requested ones I've had, and that is for chicken and pastry. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I've already cheated a little bit. I've got the chicken already cooked, but basically it's really simple to cook chicken. It's simply whatever chicken you have. If you've got a whole chicken, you put it in a pot of water, salted. Definitely salt your water. You want to season it while it's cooking. I salted the water. I had chicken breasts and a couple chicken tenders on hand, so I used 2 big chicken breasts and a packet full of, actually it wasn't chicken tenders, it was thinly sliced breast meat. So I used that and salted, put a little bit of garlic salt, or not garlic salt, but garlic powder in the water, and I let it cook on a slow simmer for a few hours today. Then what I do is I turn it off and I leave the lid on it and let it sit there like that, because what happens when your chicken breast boils, or when any meat does that, it tends to seize up. But if you let it sit like that, it's just like if you're roasting meat and you let it sit before you carve it, it kind of relaxes and all the juices go where they need to go. Well, when you do it to chicken that's in the pot, when it boils like that and you put the lid on it and turn the heat off and you let it sit for a while, that meat that's seized up like this will start to relax and suddenly become really, really tender. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the chicken out and I'm going to go ahead and shred it, and you may or may not hear my dogs. Right now the toy poodle is at my feet, the miniature poodle is over there. Miniature poodle's not too keen on the toy poodle yet, so you may hear them growling and stuff, and if you do, I'm sorry. But anyway, I'm going to go up here and pardon the state of my cabinets. My cabinets are a mess, but they are what they are. This is what you get. Anyway, so I'm going to get the chicken out, and I'm going to go ahead and shred it, and after that, we're going to put it back in the pot. We're going to add a little bit, probably, well, not a little bit, but probably about 2 cartons of chicken stock, not broth, stock. The reason being is if you buy chicken broth, it might be slightly cheaper than the chicken stock, but the taste difference is ridiculous. Chicken stock is made with the bones and everything. Chicken broth is basically where they boil meat and they add a lot of salt. That's basically what the seasoning in chicken broth is basically salt. And I don't like to have that much salt in my stuff. I like to be able to control the amount that I'm having in the recipe, so this is how I do it. I use stock and it tastes so much better, so much better. So anyway, I am just going to sit here and I'm going to go ahead and shred this, and I will see you back here in just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and pause. Okay, so I'm back and I have gone ahead and I've shredded up all the chicken. Now I'm going to show you this. That is 2 and maybe 2.5 chicken breasts shredded. That's a lot of meat for just 2.5 breasts. So don't think that if you have 2.5 breasts, or even, 2 breasts or 1 breast in your house, that you can't make chicken and pastry, because you can. So I've turned my pot back on. I've got about 1/2 of a pot full of chicken broth from where I cooked the chicken, and I'm going to go ahead and slowly lower it down in there. Try not to splatter everywhere. I'm going to go ahead and get that heating up back again, because when we put our pastry in, you want the pot to be at a low rolling boil. You want it to be boiling, because that is when you add your chicken, well, rather your pastry to it. Your pastry is going to be covered in flour, and that flour is going, and the starch from the pastry itself is what's going to thicken it up and make it into gravy. So that's what's going to happen there. So to this pot of chicken and chicken broth, I think I'm going to add, let me reach right behind here and grab a carton of chicken stock. I usually use Chicken Collection, but it's gone up in price lately. Who knows why. But using Swanson, but it is the chicken stock, not the chicken broth. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. We're going to season all of this, like serious seasoning. Oh, speaking of which, I'm going to show you what I added to the water when I went ahead and boiled the chicken breast up. All right, we're going to add that. I'm going to reach around here again and grab this. I use this religiously. You can also use Better Than Boullion, but I buy this and I get it off of Amazon because I can't find it anywhere here locally. But it's called Miner's Chicken Base, and I use it all the time. I love this stuff. It's a paste. It's not, see, I mean, I've used a lot of it, as you can see. But it's a paste. Oh, it smells so good. And it just boosts the flavor. In fact, we're going to use more in just a little bit. But I add that to the chicken as I am cooking it. And like I said, I've got this in here. It's starting to heat up a little bit. We're going to let that heat. And while that's doing that, we're going to start working on the pastry. So what I'm going to do is, I don't have absolute measurements for this. I always eyeball it. And I'm sorry. But basically, this is about an 8-quart stock pot. And for that, I'm going to start off at about 4 cups of flour. We're going to roll out the dough once we mix it up and let it rest for a few minutes. We're going to let it rest, and let me explain why we're going to let it rest. We're going to let it rest because flour has gluten, and the more you work it, it activates that gluten, and then you want to let it rest because then it relaxes the gluten so that when you roll it out, have you ever rolled a dough and you try to push it out, and as soon as you come back, it comes back to you? It's because you haven't let it rest long enough. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to get 4 cups of flour. So hold on one second. 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right. So I've got 4 cups of flour in here. And we're going to go ahead and put that on the stand mixer. And we're going to put, I'm not using a dough hook, I'm just using the paddle attachment. You can use the dough hook if you want to, but I'm not going to. So we've got that, and let me grab some seasonings off camera real quick that you can't see. Hang on one second. I'm running low on this one that I really like. So I'm going to have to go and get more of that. But I am going to use some garlic powder. In fact, that's going to go in here right now. About a half a teaspoon or so. But I'm also going to put some in my dough. Not a ton of it, just a little bit of it. I am also going to add parsley. If I have fresh parsley, I use that. I haven't planted my parsley yet this year, and I've been using dried parsley, as you can tell. But I'm going to add some to my stock pot. And yes, I'm adding some to my pastry. Why? Because it makes the pastry look pretty. And it also, I think you can taste it in there too. All right, this is probably one of the best things I could ever tell you to buy in the world. This is a complete seasoning, and it's from this brand called Badia. I think it's Badia or Badia. Badia, and you find it in the Hispanic aisle in a grocery store. I find this one particularly at Food Lion. They have the big ones, and they're cheap, like way cheap. In fact, if you notice, both of these are also the same name brand, because I was in there one day and I was looking for, what was it? I was looking for, oh, I know what it was. I was looking for cinnamon. It was like the holidays. And so I was in the spice aisle and I was looking at the McCormick's and all the other name brand ones that were ridiculous. They were, I think for a small little bottle or a little container, it was over $5. And this other couple were sitting there looking at it with me, and all of a sudden I remembered, oh wait, it's in the other aisle, way cheaper, like way cheap. So I rushed over there real quick, and I found what I wanted, And I ran back over there to them and I said, hey, I know I don't know you. Please don't think I'm crazy. But before you buy this, I said, do you see this container? And I picked up a container about this size. I said, see this? I just got this on the next aisle over. I said, for half of the price of what they're asking here for this one. So they rushed over there. They thought, where has this been all my life? Yeah, exactly. That's what you're going to ask yourself too. So anyway, I'm going to add this to the water, or not the water, but the stock. I'm going to save a little bit just in case I need more later. I'm going to put these to the side, and we're going to get working on the pastry. Oh, I guess I ought to do some salt and pepper too. So I'm going to do a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper and set these to the side. And we're going to stir this up just a little bit to get all that going. Oh my, the dogs are not happy. Well, the one dog's not happy. The poodle's happy. He's bugging the heck out of the older one. The older one's not happy because he is bugging him. All right. So we're going to start off with 1 cup of water. Okay, just plain water. You can use chicken stock, by the way, if you want to do that. And I have done that before. I've used chicken stock in my pastry. Just adds to the flavor. Doesn't do anything as far as messing up the recipe or anything. It just adds flavor to it. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to start on low. It's going to be loud. I'm going to tell you that now. But I'm going to start on low and I'm going to slowly drizzle in the water. And I'm going to warn you already. We've got 4 cups of flour in here. It's going to take much more than just 1 cup to get this going. So let me start this. I'm incorporating what's in there already just so it's all mixed together. Now I'm going to start adding the water. You can hear the machine starting to work harder. That's a good thing. So it's starting to come together. I'm going to need more water. I'm going to add a half a cup at a time. I'm going to kick up the speed just a little. All right. Here's what's happened. The dough, as I was pouring in, I poured in the 1 cup and it started mixing and it started what we call flocking, which means it started clumping up in little clumps. Then, as I noticed it needed more water, I added another half a cup and it started to come together, and when it came together, it started cleaning the sides of the bowl. You know how you usually see the flour on the outside of the bowl? Well, let me show you what it's done. This is what it's done. Do you see how it's not on the side of the bowl? See how it cleaned that out? Well, it's not cleaned out there just because this is stuck there. But anyway, that's what you want it to do. It's pulled away from the sides. It's kind of sticky. It is a sticky dough right now, and that's okay. Yeah, that's what you want. You want kind of, it's sticky, but it's not. You see how I can touch it and it's not sticking to my finger? That's what you want right there. So it's coming off the paddle perfectly. It's not sticking to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to let it sit and we're going to let it rest for a few minutes. Like I said, when you let it rest like that, all of that gluten relaxes and it makes it able to roll the dough out without any issues. It won't roll back on you as you are trying to roll it out. So we have a clump of dough. See, that's what it looks like. We have a nice clump of dough. And that's exactly what you want. See, it stuck to my hands, but not a whole lot. So we're going to let this sit here, and we're going to let it rest. It smells really good, by the way. But we're going to let it rest for a few minutes. I'll wash my hands off. So while we are letting that rest and we're letting this come up to a boil, which I'm going to turn it up just a little bit higher, I am going to pause the video and I will see you back in a minute and we'll get ready to roll out. Okay, I have let the dough rest for a little bit, probably about 5 minutes or so. You can certainly let it rest a little bit longer than that. In the meantime, what I did is I went ahead, I added a little bit of that chicken base to my stock. Not a lot, maybe a tablespoon or two, while that's heating up. I'm using a silicone mat down on my counter. You can use it just on your counter, put flour on your counter if you want. But I'm using a silicone mat, and I'm also flouring it. I've got a little sieve, and I'm just dusting flour all over it. And this sieve is going to come in handy, this little strainer, because we're going to put the flour on top of it as well. So I am going to flour my hands so it doesn't stick to my hands too much. I'm going to pull out some of the dough. We're going to work in little batches, okay? So I'm just going to make a disc, maybe a little rectangle since this is rectangular shape. Put it on here. I have a rolling pin. You can use whatever rolling pin you have. Actually, I have a new one coming. I've got one of the French ones, the dowels that are smaller on the ends. I like those, and I really want one, so I'm waiting for it to get here. So we're going to roll this out as thin as you can possibly get it. I mean thin, like paper thin. And I'm going to flip this around a little bit. Keep going. Whoops. See, it's starting to stick, so I'm going to want to put a little bit of flour on there. A little bit more on there. Roll it out this way and roll it back. I'm trying to get it pretty much to the edge of this mat. Okay. All right, I think that's pretty good. Now, at this point, and it is super thin. I don't know if you can, I don't think you can see this, but I'll do better next time. This is like super, super, super thin. So, I'm going to take some flour. Yes, I'm flouring it even more. I want that flour because remember, that's what's going to thicken that up. You can use a pizza wheel, a pizza cutter. I have one of these. I'm going to be honest with you, I've not used this yet, so we're about to find out whether or not it works. If not, I'm heading over that way to get the pizza wheel. So, I like mine in bite-sized pieces. I know that some people like doing long strips. I like mine in bite-sized ones. I like to pick up some chicken and some pastry at the same time. So, let's try it. Let's see how it does. Alright, so far so good. I told you, dogs are not getting along. Okay, let's go this way. Not too bad. Could be much worse, but Sandy, don't kill your brother, please. Alright, so with that, I do have a bench scraper in here that got wet, which is not good because I don't want it wet. Dry this off. I just had it sitting in there waiting. So this has now come to a boil. And in fact, now that it's on to a boil, hey, if you two are going to fight, take it somewhere else. No rumbles in the kitchen. So I'm going to scoop this up along with any flour I can grab. Let's make sure these are all torn apart first. There. Can you see how thin that is? It's like super, super thin. So let me pull these apart since I've never used this before. This is new for me. I might end up doing the pizza wheel. I mean, that was really easy, but I don't want to have to stand here and pull them all apart. With the pizza cutter, I don't have to do that. So let's just do this real quick. And like I said, the whole reason we floured the heck out of this was to thicken that up into a gravy. And remember, your pasta, which is basically what you've just made, your pastry does not have to be perfect. It does not have to be squares. It does not have to be circles, ovals, strips, or anything. You can stand here and roll it out really thin and just literally tear it apart with your fingers. In fact, in Korea, they have this soup that they call sujebi, I think is what it's called. And it's basically, they make a pasta dough like we did, exactly like we did. And they stand there and they stretch it with their hands and pull it off in chunks and throw it into the broth to make a soup out of it. And it looks really good. And all the pieces are all funky shapes and stuff, but it's the exact same thing. It's funny how so many different countries have the same stuff, but we all call it something different, you know, with different spices and seasonings, but it's all the same. So we're going to pick this up and we're going to lower it into our broth carefully because that stuff will splatter back on you and it will hurt. Just letting you know right now, from experience, that's what happens. But when you do add it, make sure that you stir it because you don't want your stuff sticking together. So make sure you stir it up. And while that starts cooking, you can go on to your next batch. And we're just going to go ahead and flour your surface again. Pull out some more. A little more than that. And kind of shape it a little bit. Stick it on there. Flour it again. And start rolling. So this is basically it. This is what you're doing the entire time. And you're just keeping an eye on your pot at the same time. Oh, stop it. Hey, enough out of you, mister. I said enough. Nobody wants to hear you. So anyway, that's what you do. He thinks I knocked at the door. He thinks someone's knocking, so. Hey, stop it. It's the rolling pin. Stop. So anyway, that's what you're going to do. You're going to continue doing this and continue adding it and make sure you stir it every single time. And I will see you back here in a minute. Okay, so I'm back and I am working on my last piece of dough. I've probably done this 5, maybe 6 times. And just so you know, there's a reason why I tell you to roll it super, super thin. And that is because when it cooks, it clumps up probably 3 times the size that it is. So that is why you want to get it as thin as possible. I'm going to continue on with this piece. I'm almost done. After I add these, I'll probably let it cook maybe about another 10 minutes or so, just so that these cook up, because they don't take long, because it's basically fresh pasta. And you know what happens when you cook fresh pasta? It takes considerably less time. It only takes like 2 to 3 minutes compared to the 10 minutes it takes if you're using dried pasta. So I'm going to add these, let it cook maybe another 10 minutes. That's going to allow that gravy to thicken up. I'm also going to turn down the temperature on it because I don't want it to keep boiling. And yes, I continued using this only because I'm lazy and didn't feel like washing a pizza cutter as well. I mean, it's not that bad. I don't totally dislike this thing. I'm getting the hang of it. But, like I said, almost done. So, I'm going to dust these again with some more flour. Scoop them up to make sure that none of them stick to the bottom. And now that none of them are sticking, I'm going to go through, pull them apart. I'm going to add them to the pot, 5 or 6, maybe 7 or 8 at a time. And every time I add, I stir so that those don't stick together. And I'm also making sure to scrape along the bottom, because sometimes what will happen is when your pot starts to get full of the pastry, it'll start to weigh down the ones on the bottom and they'll start to stick, and you don't want that to happen. So, and you know, you can do this with anything. It doesn't have to be chicken and pastry. It can be turkey and pastry. It could be, believe it or not, duck and pastry is really good if you get a good duck. Because, you know, ducks taste like what they eat. So if you get like a muddy duck, a duck that lives in the mud and eats fish that live in the mud, your duck's going to taste like mud. If you get a really good tasting duck, you know, for all the hunters out there and stuff, they'll know what you're talking about. If you want to ask them if they can get you a really good tasting duck, duck and pastry is really good too. You wouldn't think so because of the gamey taste to it sometimes. But honestly, doing it this way, to me, kind of negates that gaminess. And it tastes really good. All right, enough. He sounds like Cujo, but he's really not. He's fine. Hey, stop picking on your old brother. So anyway, another way to do it is, believe it or not, beef and pastry, which up north in Amish country, which is originally where I'm from, we eat Pennsylvania Dutch food, and we'll do beef and noodles, basically, is what we call it up there, because we'll do these in long strips, and it makes a gravy, and we do the same thing with chicken, and oh my gosh, it's just so good. It is so good. But like I said, you can do it with any meat that you have. You can use leftover. In fact, this is what I did one year. I had leftover turkey gravy and lots of turkey. Actually, it wasn't lots of turkey. It was just a little bit of turkey. But it was enough to make something with like a casserole or something, but not enough to use as like just a main side, you know, main dish with sides. So what I did is I used the gravy. Like I had 2 quarts or more of gravy. I started off with some chicken stock out of a box. I added the turkey gravy and then added some water. And wow, did that add a lot of flavor to it. And then I added in my turkey. I just shredded it all up. And after that, I added the pastry and just let it cook a little while. Added some seasonings to it. I'm telling you, it was so good. It was so good. I mean, it sounds like I'm, you know, going crazy about myself, and I don't mean to, but oh my gosh, it was yummy. It was so yummy. And it was a good way to use up something that I had in the fridge. So right now I'm just adding some more parsley to it, just to make it pretty. Anything that's kind of bland looking, like a soup or chicken and pastry or whatever, just that little pop of green really makes it look so much better. So I'm going to try to give you a look at what this looks like here. I'm going to try to pick up the camera and bring it over this way and show you real quick. Hold on one second. Let me wash my hands off first. It's also a really good way of making something out of nothing. It's a very cheap meal to make. And once you've mastered making the pastry, which really there's nothing to master, it's super simple. It's just flour and water. I mean, you don't have to add the garlic powder. You don't have to add the parsley flakes. You don't have to add any of that stuff. Once you do that, once you've got that mastered, you can make, you know, a meal for a bunch of people out of very little money and very little food. Turn this down now. Okay. Alright, I'm going to try to pick this up and show you real quick what this looks like. Alright, so this is what I'm talking about. Do you see how thick it gets? And do you see how paper thin that was at one point in time, and now it's thicker? It's much, much thicker. And the gravy has formed. There's chicken strewn all the way through it. It's just really yummy. So, see if I can put this back where it needs to be. There we go. So anyway, that is my very first cooking video. I know it needs some work. Hopefully I'll do better on the next one. But thanks for watching if you did watch. God bless you. I hope you guys are doing okay through this whole COVID thing. And I'm praying that you and your family are healthy and safe.